Hello. There are many little things we carry with us which share responsibility for weighing us down psychologically and emotionally. An example of this would be a time or a bunch of times you were hurt by someone and they did not make it right. They can have quite an impact, so it's really important to talk about. It's a tricky one for me because a popular psychological perspective these days is not in alignment with my perspective on the matter. I think it's too broad, and I think it's incomplete, and I think it errs on the side of martyrdom. My current mindset is a reflection of my progress psychologically, because an earlier version of me would always have done what's best for the other person, being certain that putting myself second would always be erring on the side of right. I used to feel selfish for giving myself equal priority, and I wouldn't enforce healthy boundaries around my own mental well being and my right to peace. According to the current school of thought, forgiving someone isn't about whether they deserve it. It asserts that a lack of forgiveness doesn't hurt the other person nearly as much as it hurts you, and that holding a grudge simply means you're holding on to anger and resentment and denying yourself psychological resolution. It goes on to explain that you will find peace when you reach a point when you no longer need an apology or even an acknowledgement that the wrongdoing was done in order to forgive somebody. I do see the merit in taking control of how you perceive the situation. And I also agree with freeing yourself from waiting for someone to fix you. But I fail to see how forgiving someone who denies or ignores hurting you equals psychological resolution. I'm not saying that I have a diminished capacity for forgiveness. On the contrary, I've forgiven some egregious hurts and given clean slates. But what I'm saying is that when I no longer need the other person to understand, accept, and take responsibility for hurting me, when those things are no longer prerequisites for forgiving someone, for me, that translates to self-betrayal, a betrayal of my self-worth. In our world, when people commit crimes against each other, large or small, the expected outcome is some sort of accountability. That's what neutralizes the offense. So why would we, when suffering a psychological or emotional hurt because of the choices of someone else, abandon the expectation of accountability? If the offender can either pretend it didn't happen or deny that it did, they're robbing us of the psychological peace of letting it be real that it happened. And even if we're rock solid in knowing that it happened, it forces us to diminish how much our peace and happiness and well-being matter. Now, people make mistakes. I make mistakes. Some people realize their mistakes right away, and some it takes a while. Some people have trouble admitting their mistakes, while others are at a state of unrest until they fix them. So the paths between a hurt and a resolution can look very different. But I think that psychologically, there's a big difference between being hurt by someone who then ignores or denies it and being hurt by someone who realizes what they did, understands what they did, regrets what they did, accepts responsibility for what they did, and are willing to humble themselves to make that known to you so that you can be in the reality that yes, it did happen. No, it shouldn't have happened, and that it matters when you're hurt. I agree that we must show patience and compassion and a willingness to forgive. But here's where it gets tricky, because we can't force everyone to own everything, and we certainly can't force people to be aware, to be able, or to be motivated to fix it. I agree that there are circumstances in which we need to reach our own psychological peace and abandon the need or expectation of something from someone to go on with our lives. However, the distinction that I want to make is that to regain control and peace for ourselves, we can accept that we're never going to get what we want from that person. We can understand that, and we can work on letting go of the anger, of the unfairness of that, recognizing that it is their deficit and their shortcomings and their inability that prevents this. And it's not about what we deserve, it's about what they're incapable of. An important distinction here is that when I say accept it, I mean in terms of seeing it for what it is and not expecting it to change to something better. But it needs a big but. I feel that to go a step further and suggest that that needs to go along with forgiveness of that person, for me, that carries with it the nuance that it's okay. And that's the tipping point for me. Because ironically, for my healing, I feel like I deserve to maintain that it was not okay. I'm not going to minimize in my mind my standards for how I'm treated. So when I get revisited by memories of hurts unresolved, my narrative is not going to be, they hurt me, they never fixed it, and I forgive them. I can't do that. So I certainly can't ask you to do it. I don't care what the popular viewpoint on forgiveness is. It's my personal opinion that a healthy narrative that protects your psychological well being and the self respect that you're entitled to is, they hurt me, they're not going to fix it, and that has nothing to do with what I deserve and everything to do with what they're lacking. And I will accept that, and I can't do anything about that, but I won't force forgiveness. I will instead work on not needing to forgive them in order to achieve my peace. Now, I absolutely respect that many people will disagree with my viewpoint, and that's okay. That's what this is about, knowing that you're not wrong about what forgiveness means to you, and you're not stubborn or cold-hearted if maintaining the integrity of the concept of forgiveness includes leaving the apology part in there. Just remember, other people don't determine what you're worth. You do. Be well.